me tell you something. Being a digital artist is fantastic. However, it also comes at a price. Your skill level is limited to the knowledge that you have. And nowhere does this apply more than your drawing program. If you don't know all the ins and outs of your program, it could end up causing your progress on your art to be a lot more slow compared to some of your contemporaries. And look, man, time is precious to me. I have to watch Shrek 5 times a day. Right now, it's only been 2 times a day. This is horrendous. I can't allow this to keep going. So today I'm teaching you guys some tips and techniques I found in Clip Studio Paint specifically that can help you speed up your drawing process, whether it's through the coloring or otherwise.
So get your Wacom tablet, get your Cintiq, get your Quanba Drone 2 arcade fighting stick. Anyway, let's shimmy right on into it. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about that probably many of you have seen, but probably don't know what this is, are things called auto actions. Now, this is stuff that I have already set up right over here. Line plus, line minus, gauss that shit up and black out. You might be wondering what the heck all these things are. Well, these are things called auto actions. This is a really cool thing that Clip Studio Paint is able to do, is that it can record a set of actions and then compile them as like a micro action that you can do in order to repeat. Think of it like trying to do something like wave dashing in a fighting game. Actually, well, shoot, no, not everybody's gonna know what that is. Basically, you're telling Clip Studio Paint to mimic a set of functions that you have done and repeat that essentially and have it on a command as a playlist. As you can take a look in here in like something like line plus or gauss that shit up, it has certain actions in here that it'll play in order. So let's say I do a drawing of like a cute face real quick. Look at this Huggabee. And then I tell it to do the command of gauss that shit up. Hit play. And as you can tell, there's some added features. It's been glossed up just a slight bit on a transparent layer. So there's a new layer that's been added that not only has copied the previous layer, but it has basically turned down the opacity and it's added a Gaussian blur to it. This allows it to just have a little bit of like a enhanced effect. I usually do this just to help clean up some of my line work. Works wonders and it has a nice little finish. So you might be wondering, how do we make our own auto action then? Well, here's what we're going to do. So let me clear this out of the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit this button right here. And when we highlight over, it's going to say add new auto action to the current auto action. But basically, it's just going to bring up a brand new thing when everything else here is closed. So it brings up a brand new auto action. We're going to call this duplicate. And so the purpose of this is we're going to make this auto action just duplicate a layer. That's what we're basically going to tell it. So we're going to highlight this layer that we have. Then we're going to hit the big red button. Press that big red button. And then what we're going to go is we're going to right click on the layer that we have. Hit duplicate layer. Hit pause. And so now we have a new auto action made that basically is just going to duplicate the layer. So all we have to do in order to play that action is just hit the play button. Bada bing, bada boom. Pretty simple. All right, so the next couple of things are basically techniques on coloring that you can use with Clip Studio Paint in order to help you expedite the process a little bit, or to streamline some things, or find new ways to color. But basically, here's the full list. So we're going to look at some of the layers right here. As you can see, we got 5 layers here. We have the line layer, and then a couple of layers called highlights and shade, the flats, and then another layer called filler. About to explain what all these are. So obviously lines, that's the line art. Flats are the basic flat colors. But then these 3 other layers, highlights, shade, and filler, these all relate to coloring in some way to help out with the flats. So as you might tell from the names alone, highlights and shade basically are for things that relate to the highlights or the shade. Now, because I do heavy shading, which is basically just using black to shade and create outlines, similar to that of Imayashi's earlier work in the 2000s or Mike Mignola's work on specifically Hellboy, there is a way that you can do some shading on here, like for cell shading, painting shading, and things like that. With these layer functions. And the same thing applies to the highlights. So I'm about to go over that in a second. So let me describe what these layers right here are actually. These are what are called as clip layers. These little clip layers right here can clip to a specific layer so that way they can hold on to it. So let's say I want to add some shading here. I'm going to put on a stroke right here. So right now it's currently attached to the bottom color there. So it's essentially sticking to that region like a clipping mask. It's technically not a clipping mask, it's a layer itself that's just following what's going on the bottom layer. When I hit this button to turn it off from clipping to that layer below, it technically unmasks. And so now you see the actual full effect of that color. Pressing this button again, and as you can tell, it's still within the confines of those flats down below it. Now, what I'm going to show you is a pretty cool technique in order to do some easy coloring. You may have already known about this, but I'm just going to show it to you anyway, just so we can show the basics of what these clip layers can do. So I'm going to put in a blue color right here, and then I'm going to change the layer settings. This is a pretty quick and easy way just to fix it. And change it to multiply, and then change the opacity to 45. And so now we have a little bit of a shading layer here. And the best part is that I can rearrange it in order. So now those highlights that you saw before that were on top of the shades, now they're covered by it. So now they're covered within that shadow there. And the best part is also I could essentially just reorganize the layers, and that if I were to put it on top of the line art right there, and say I were to change it, move it away from normal color, now you can see that the color's changed to fit the line art. So I could basically just change the color of the line art itself right then and there in order to give it a new effect. Pretty cool. So I could basically do that, just add an extra effect on there when I'm done with the line art. That's a cool little effect that I can do there. So let me just return back to 0 that I originally had. But these are great ways to just so that way you can not have to worry so much about like having to create a separate layer and trying to keep it in the confines. This allows for you to have a little bit more freeform mess when it comes to the shading, and keep it within, keep it attached to the flat, so you don't have to worry so much about being 100% anal about shading. And this is another technique that I want to talk to you guys about real quick. This little layer down here that I have at the back called filler. This is basically a black silhouette, or whatever kind of color I want to in order to fill it in, that I have behind underneath the flats of the character. So when I remove this, you can see that there's a little bit of like empty space that pops up. So like say right here, you can see that there's some little areas I forgot to color. When I press this, it makes it seem like the line art's been fully filled in and removing those spots. Because of how I do my line art, this is actually really good because it helps close the gap in certain areas and helps to make a more clean and presentable appearance. Another technique that I do that I talked about with the auto actions is I basically create a ghost version of the line art layer just to give it like an extra hint of like slight filtering and crisp to it, and help to like blend in some of those finer details of line art that just don't clip together 100% and make them look like they're fully together. And with the way the gloss is, you can tell there's like a slight tiny little glow, but it's not there exactly, but it helps make the line art pop a little bit. Next up that we're going to talk about is just some of the layer properties. Now you may know about like things like correction layers, or like things like that, or clipping mask layers and things, but this right here is the layer properties. Basically, you're on a layer and you can actually change the properties of that layer itself. So there's these 4 little boxes right over here, and I'm going to teach you specifically about the tone and the border effect. So the border effect, essentially, when we click on border effect, it creates an edge color, and it turns all the lines or drawings that were used within that clip, that layer, to have a distinct border. So now all of Tama's lines here, and that's the character here, all of her lines now have a white border. If I wanted to change that, I can go in here, change the color, and I can also change the thickness of the edge. So say I want it just to be a slight bit thinner, I could do something like that to just give it like a little extra pizzazz or something otherwise. Or I can go back and give it a white border again. I can give it any color I want to, just to give it a little bit of a distinct flavor. You can use whatever you want with this. This is a pretty good way to make some creative effects. And if I flatten it, it keeps the effect on there. So you can actually just change the little layer effect if you want to add an additional property to all the line art, and then just flatten it or just close it down. And it changes back to a 0 layer property, but it keeps all the effects applied. So keep that in mind. Let me go back to 0 again real quick. Next thing I'm going to show you is a layer called the tone layer. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn on the tone layer. You don't see anything yet because I just created a brand new clipping layer that doesn't have any color on it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill this in with a black fill. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the opacity. And all of a sudden, you see this halftone effect be created. So this is a pretty interesting way of like creating a pseudo halftone effect. And when I go in here, go to the soft eraser, I can erase more parts of it and reduce some of the halftones in there. So this is a pretty cool way of just creating some really quick and easy halftones. There's actually a full system in Clip Studio Paint that allows you to create halftones and such, but we're not going to go into that fully here. I just wanted to go in depth a bit more about like what this all can do. And once again, I can change the color of this, of the halftones. Now, granted here, it is registering this as monochrome, as you can see here. Even though it says expression color, it's registering them as like a monochrome color for some reason. So it's registering them as blacks and whites and not as their actual color. So this is more ideal if you're just doing like blacks and whites and such, unfortunately. But it is something that's a pretty cool way if you're just trying to create some toning effects in here. And as I zoom in, you can see more of the tones. It's some slight circle edges and such. So that's a pretty cool, nifty thing to have at your disposal as well, especially if you try to do half toning. You can experiment around as well. Let me bring this back up, actually. You can experiment around with like the frequency of the dots. So like say you can make them smaller and have more of a detailed effect, or increase it so that way it's like bigger dots. And of course, like I said, messing with the opacity changes the size of the dots as well. So say I wanted to increase the frequency here. There you go. A lot of cool stuff that you can do with this tone effect. Next thing I want to talk about with colors, though, actually relates to this here. This thing that's called color sets. You can actually create your own color palettes. This is something that happens in Photoshop and other art programs. But I want to teach you specifically about this because you may not fully be aware of it. And this is honestly a really great tool to have. So that way, if you're doing comics and things like that, you can easily just pick colors on the fly. As you can see, I have a color palette already here with a bunch of colors. But let me go ahead and we're going to create a brand new color set. So we're going to hit that little wrench. It's going to bring up this thing called Edit Color Sets. And once we're done here, we're going to go to Create New Color Set. Brings up a little dialog box. I'm going to type it in. Call it Test Set. Hit OK. And as we can see, we have a brand new blank set of colors we can do. So all we have to do is basically, we're just going to go to put some colors in here. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, select some of Tama's skin color, and then I'm going to hit this icon right down here that says Add Color, and it creates a brand new color for us to pick from. And you just do this. We're going to take all of her colors shown here, and we can also just add in stuff from the color wheel as well. So we're going to put in some like colors for shading. And so we're just going to do that, put in a blue. And one thing I have to say is, unfortunately, when you have the eyedropper tool on and you select this color, it will automatically change it to this transparent color. So make sure you change it back to the color you had selected, and that's selected on the empty space, and then put in that new color. If you want to replace an already existing color, all you got to do is just press this button down here. We're going to change the color over here, and hit Replace Color, and we'll place that box in. So basically we just show you, for example, that when I put in a new color here, it's just going to put in that blue, press this button, it creates a new palette, and then press replace, and it replaces that color entirely. This is a great way to help keep a repertoire of colors for shading or colors for all of your characters if you're working on a comic or illustration projects or just any kind of colors that you love using specifically in your art style. This is a great way to keep things all together so you have it on hand on an easy access sort of panel. And those are some of the techniques that I found through Clip Studio Paint that have helped me expedite my drawing process. If you found this video informative and you want me to do more tutorials on Clip Studio Paint or drawing in general, just let me know. I would love to know if people are interested in this kind of stuff. Anyway, yeah, that's all I have to say for today. But thank you guys for watching. God bless.